Oh, um, Mia, can you send Alex Knopp a link? He said he didn't get it.
What's his email address?
Let me see. Alex Knopp is um Alex AlexSheff at gmail.com.
Sorry, can you say that again? Sorry.
Sure. AlexSheff at gmail.com.
Okay, there we go. I just sent it to him.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Let's see if I heard. That's all I've heard from.
Fran, we have an ed committee meeting today at 2. So I'll have to
Okay.
off a few minutes early if this is still going.
Yeah, okay. Um, we're missing some people, I think, but I'm gonna go ahead.
Great.
Um, Alex just got on, so
Thank you,
okay.
Fran. Sorry, yeah.
Yep.
Hey,
We'll
Jen.
we'll move it. So thankfully, George is here from Connecticut Finance Project, and George and many others, and many thanks to Lisa and her whole staff for putting together the draft recommendations. And we can go over those today. We had left off, we hadn't handled the Alliance District Program at all. Do you want to start with that and then go back?
Well, Fran, can I ask a question before we start on the
Yes.
policy issues? So I'm kind of curious from Jen and Senator McCrory in particular, and Mary, how do you see this document playing a role in the current session? I mean, my impression as an outsider, former legislator, is that things are still pretty much up in the air, even though Probst has issued a budget politically, and that an increase in some ECS elements, maybe the foundation amount above others, and the 12 million are still in play. So I'm kind of curious about how you see this document, playing a role in the session, because I think that may help us determine what we want to emphasize and draw attention to in it.
I appreciate that question, Alex. Senator, do you want to go first?
You can go first because I got two meetings going on right here. That's why you see the side of my face. So I didn't hear the question. So you can address the question first, and then I can follow up with you afterwards. Okay.
You got it. It's a really good question. So I think under the spending cap, we recognize there's not quite the wiggle room that our schools really need to be adequately funded. And we've had some additional challenges in this year that are unique, given sort of the 10% decline in public school student enrollment, which is really messing with how much money schools are getting when we have a student-centered funding framework. So what I will say from the House leadership side, we had a whole press conference on was utilizing, I think anywhere from like 150 million to 170 million of the volatility funds that the governor had pulled aside. I think in his vision was sort of those energy rebates. our vision is to use that for funding our schools. And so I think with that being sort of the funding stream, how it's allocated, I think we don't want to move away from our sort of ECS formula, but thinking about within that framework, what is the best sort of levers to pull to get the most amount of money to our schools. And so I think within that framework is why we're still talking about raising our foundation amount. And I think there's still also interest in phasing down the local tuition payments to our magnets and increasing the state share for those payments so that we're alleviating that local burden on our districts that are disproportionately aligned districts and disproportionately ones paying tuition payments. Is that helpful, Alex?
Yes, I mean, my impression is that, if we were issuing a document in the off season, we would have more recommendations rather than few. At this stage of the session, since these issues are still in play, there seems to be a kind of again, I'm an outsider now, but my impression is there seems to be a consensus around that the foundation amount is a big problem and the tuition payments are a big problem, that maybe we end up with fewer rather than many more recommendations in order to put more juice behind what's realistically possible given the limitations of the guardrails. And that's why I think this question is worth discussing among us before we start, adding or subtracting policy recommendations. I agree with, your assessment, Jen. Obviously, it's an expert assessment given your position there, but I think my hope is that we would use our report, and there's nothing that says we can't do a supplemental report afterward, that we use an initial report to push the ball forward as much as possible in the areas where you think there's a realistic hope of making some improvement.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I also think, harnessing the brain power of this group to maybe even after the session, continue to think about the impact of the base aid ratio and how that's calculated and how that is
Right.
impacted based on the timeline of districts doing their reevaluations. Like those sort of more nuanced things, I think will need a little more time and could benefit from the power of this brain trust, if you will.
I think especially, I apologize for talking so much. I think especially given the fact that the volatility fund is a one-time enterprise, for us to come up with sort of permanent, numerous permanent recommendations, the timing may not be quite right for that, though we could address that after the session.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jen, how much of the 150 to 170 are you thinking gets allocated to the tuition payments? That's sort of shifting the burden to the state.
I don't know that there's like a proportion. I think folks are probably most interested in first seeing raising the foundation. How much of that 170 does that eat up? Then what's left over for sort of the phase in, phase out. That's my sort of just gut assessment. But, these are all shifting conversations and they're all happening in real time. But that's sort of, I think there's like raising the foundation one is super easy to understand and super easy for people to calculate what it would mean for their district, right? So that like has a lot of people very excited about it because you can really easily understand what that would mean. I think the tuition, it takes like a little time, right? For people to kind of be like, wait, why would we want to do that? What does that mean? If you're a district that doesn't really pay a lot of tuition, you're like, I care less about that. But when we're thinking about primarily our cities and primarily our alliance districts, right? That's a big cost for them. And it's been a big burden. And then we're also have, I think, unintentionally capped all of our children who go to those schools, right? What it means to be at those schools have been capped because the state hasn't contributed more. And we've also frozen the tuition to try to alleviate the burden on our LEAs. But that has left all of those public schools flat funded for quite a while. So I think those folks also care.
So again, Jen, I guess the question was, what are we doing as far as the foundation amount? I don't know exactly what the question was. Everything you said, I agree to. What was there a specific question?
Alex
Again,
was sort of just checking the temperature of like this point in the session, where are we? And like, you know, how much room is there for this group to really weigh in, or should we kind of tailor it to what we think is likely to pass this session, and then maybe after session continue some of the more complex conversations, right, Alex? Is that was sort of
Yeah.
gist.
It's really whether we want to have a, you know, a lengthy list or a short strategic list, given what we know are the parameters of financially that are under debate right now.
I honestly don't know that our group is going to change the debate at the legislature right now. I think that debate is well on its way. And to some extent, Alex, I think you're not wrong to think like this group has to kind of contemplate beyond this legislative session, because I think the decisions that are going to be made they're well on their way to being made. The governor is weighing in, the Senate and the House are having their own kind of discussion. They're utilizing one-time allocation, so it's not going to change, you know, the formulas or anything, especially the way the money is being allocated, going to municipalities and not to the districts. So, you know, the way that it's going, I think is a stopgap measure that is probably well on its way to happening, and that our influence, should we choose to utilize it, I think will probably feel more significant next session when there's a longer period of time to kind of debate what do we think would be a valuable and meaningful change, in a much more, I think, extensive, like Jen said, with the, you know, talking about some of the more nuanced aspects of ECS. But I have and I could just be my own bias, but I feel like the ledge session is kind of moving on this topic already, and fairly confidently in different, you know, in some direction.
Well, we've only got a few weeks left, right?
Right. That's
So,
what I mean
you know,
too, right?
but here's what I don't know, and maybe Jen and Senator and Mary, you can fill me in, because this is a subgroup of the Bergen, the whole Bergen Commission. Wouldn't this be folded into an overall Bergen report?
It's a great question, Fran. This
That
is
is
sort
a
of
great
the
question.
only part.
I'm sorry, Fran. What was your question? I'm trying to
Well,
keep
I'm
thinking.
just saying that we're a subgroup of this
Right.
big Bergen Commission, right? That
Mhm.
is headed up by, is it Marianne Kahn? And I don't even remember who else, or if that's the only person,
And
but
Senator McCrory.
Senator McCrory. Okay, Senator. Okay, so the two of you are heading this up. Aren't we a subgroup? Won't this be folded into your overall report?
Yes, yes, it
That's
will.
what I
And
thought.
and
Yeah.
I'll just say, I'll just add, in my opinion, based on the conversations I have with our leadership and anecdotal conversations with others, nothing is edged in stone as to what we're going to do in regards to ECS funding right now. I mean, I'm hearing people talking about adding it to property tax relief. I don't know where that's going right now. I think what we do have agreement on is the foundation needs to be increased. And anything above that will be considered extra anecdotal. We also know that if you really want to make structural change, then you have to increase that foundation over a period of time. And everyone's talking about indexing it to inflation. So if we really want to make structural changes, that's what we have to do. One-time foundational appointment, in my opinion, doesn't do anything any good. I know it brings us back to another session, but I am fully in my leadership, based on the last conversation I had. I got a call going on. We're still moving forward with increasing the foundation over a period of time and indexing it to inflation. Anything other than that is conversation that's above my pay grade. But my priority is to increase this over a period of time and index it to inflation. And then any conversation other than that will probably have to take place in another session. But again, it will be part of all our negotiations.
I appreciate that. I appreciate it, Senator, and I appreciate hearing from Jen too. I think, I don't know how, I'm hopeful that what we have said will just be reinforcement for what I've been hearing is where you're moving forward in terms of the ECS formula. I also, to Alex's point and Jen's point, see another phase in after the session, because once we decide where the ECS is in this session, then there'll be another follow-up on that. There's just so many moving targets that it's hard to know. I mean, you've also got the governor saying he's doing a commission on funding. So, where does all of that fit together? Is the question. And I'm hopeful that I know this will be folded into an overall report, but knowing that you're here, Senator, that Jen's here, that Mary's here, that this information that we're sharing and bringing forward as a subgroup will be used in this session as well. Am I naive on thinking
No.
that? No.
I think you're hitting the target right on the head.
Okay.
With your assessment. Again, that's the blue ribbon. I think part of this blue ribbon commission that the governor is talking about, and we agree to the commission, will iron out some of the other nuanced things in regards to education funding as we move forward. I think it's very important, especially in the district, in the region that I work in. These tuition payments is a huge issue. In the not in the Alliance region, but in the Chef region. People in other regions might not be concerned about it, but in the South region, it's a huge issue. And I would really like to have that addressed, this particular year.
Yep.
Yeah, Senator, I agree with you. I mean, my district alone, I was talking to my superintendent, and the magnet tuition cut that the governor proposed, a quarter of it was going to be out of Manchester. They were going to take a $3 million hit with that 12 million. I was like, okay, wow. And so, you're right, where it hurts bad. And to, your point, Jen, that's not everywhere. I am curious, Senator, when you talk about the Senate's proposal for increasing the foundation, particularly over time, is that accounting for the 150 to 170 million that is being set aside, or is that in addition to that? Or is that the way you see us utilizing, like just in terms of what the Senate discussion is?
Yeah, again, based on the numbers that we've been looking at, the initial number just increasing the foundation was about $90 million. When you add in eliminating tuition payment, that number goes up substantially. Not another 90 million, but I can't give you a real exact number, but maybe another $40 million. So everything depends on how much we want to utilize to increase ECS, whether it's at a smaller number at about 90 or go up to about 150. It depends on where we land. We'll determine where we are in regards to reducing. There's another way you can do this also, not totally eliminate in 1 year, but you can eliminate over a period of 4 years. Where you increasing the foundation and decreasing tuition. I think that's a win. That's another win-win opportunity for us. So it all depends on how much money we actually going to put into this legislative session as we move.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that.
So
we'll answer another question on another committee, but I'll be listening with my right ear. And
okay. Do you want to go back then from the beginning, or would you prefer to start with where we left off on Alliance districts?
Well, I think it'd be helpful to start at the beginning and indicate,
Okay.
No, just for this reason, Fran, just indicate what topics are priority issues for now. Because I think that's what this discussion has been about.
Okay.
So
yeah, let's just highlight those again, and without going through all of the details, but we did say, ECS, that we led with that. That was our greatest concern.
Right.
The the piece that we did speak to, but I'm not hearing it as much in the discussion we just had, is what about the choice programs? I know the tuition piece, but what about agri-science and all of those programs? We have, we have indicated that there should be a consistent student need-based funding formula for all choice programs. We're still sticking with that, yes?
I have a small challenge to that, and I think I brought this up last time. I understand the desire to do that, and across programs that all have to live by the same rules. I think that I get it. I struggle when we layer in some of the charter component. They're in terms of they don't perform the same as agri-science and magnet in terms of the accountability structures. So I think for me, the funding, if we want to go, equivalent funding across all choice programs, I have no fundamental problem with that as long as we have comparable accountability structures in place in terms of public money having public oversight, because that's substantially changing how we fund our charters in particular without adjusting the oversight expectation of public money. So to me, there's separate issues at play that I don't want us to lose track of, because our magnets have, public board oversight. They have to have public meetings with, parental input, all of those different pieces, as is agri-science. So when we talk about moving money in that space, is you're maintaining the public oversight. But I think we have to make mention that public dollars should have public oversight. And if we're going to shift our funding trajectory in that way, then that's what we need to, I think, create the structure that makes that expectation.
I'll just say, so we've asked for several years, like, what is the exact change to the public oversight? I feel like that would make people comfortable, and we haven't gotten those specifics.
Well, I know that we certainly have put forward a number of things, including having public meetings that meet the same criteria as public boards. Right now, that's not the scenario, public agendas, public budgets, all of those kinds of things. Because right now, a lot of the budgets, like if you go on to a charter school budget, there's like 4 line items. It's like charter management is like, $12 million, and that, or whatever number it is. I made that one up. But I think the last time I looked at like an Achievement First, it was like 5 line items, and one of which was like a charter management, which was like $5 million. So I just think that some of those pieces, and we can get you again like a list of things that we've talked about, but definitely at the very least, I think this concept of, if we're going to put all this money in, where is the opportunity for public input into those communities? And I think that's one of the questions that has been brought up a number of times.
Well, they have the same accountability structure, correct?
Yes.
Am I correct on that?
Yes. All the same data requirements, all the same public reporting on student outcomes.
Right. And I'm only thinking about my time at the state. They had the same accountability structure. So the budgets, I don't know about magnet schools having public board meetings.
They do. Magnet schools have public meetings because we attend them.
The steering committee, of the board from.
Yeah, their board meetings are public.
I think some of the other concerns.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mary.
Oh, okay. Some of the other concerns that I know that I've had and others have shared in other meetings or conversations is also the accounting for monies that are coming from private organizations. So if we're, if everybody's starting from zero, that's one thing. But if if we're looking at the ability to bring in or a funding stream that is able to provide tens of millions of dollars separately, how that affects public monies going then to that institution at the same time. So I think that might be a longer debate. I don't know if we want to get into that now or.
But that's sort of the understanding, right? Charters get less state funding and then they're responsible for fundraising it. In the same way that like our public schools get many hundreds of thousands of dollars from PTAs that's like unaccounted for, right? But charters
We
are
account for that. I was a PTA president, so we had to do very strict accounting for all of
the state doesn't account for it,
Right.
right? As a part of like what holds up schools. So like you locally might, but even in Fairfield are 11 elementary schools, 11 totally different PTA budgets. And that's like a huge point of contention. I know that Fairfield's not alone in that.
No,
But
not
this is
alone.
sort of the understanding and the agreement for charters, which is that we give you less state dollars and then you're responsible. If you are doing such a good job by children, you shouldn't have a problem fundraising. And so I feel like sometimes we also like hold that against charters when that was the original like deal we made with them, which is like you have less money, a little more autonomy and flexibility, but you're on your own for the rest of the funding.
You talk about PTA fundraising. I'm gonna tell you right now, there's not a lot of money being raised in the PTA in the communities that I work in. That if you
Mine
you're
either.
thinking about holding people accountable for PTA dollars is not there often.
That might be a
But
Fairfield
also-
County challenge, but
Oh yeah, well you're
it's
right. In
I just
Fairfield County,
mean-
there might be a different number, but in
It's
my
an element of
Harvard
money, right, going
County.
towards schools that the
But-
state's not accountable for.
But other question out, and I'm just throw this out there. And when we talk about raising money from the child raising money, I don't think anybody would be opposed to. I would hope that no one would be opposed to an organization providing resources to poor communities. For example,
No.
if the Kellogg Foundation wanted to provide Bridgeport, New Britain, $100,000 to help those children, who would be opposed to that? Now, I can imagine you want to know how much it is. I mean, that's great. You want to know how much the Kellogg Foundation provided to an urban school system that's been underfunded for years. Because when I say urban schools, these are the same kids. They're the same kids. They're someone's sister, brother, whatever the case may be. I don't think anyone, I'm assuming that no one will be upset that the Kellogg Foundation provided a grant to XYZ school to help them improve the quality of education. I mean,
No,
do
of
you
course
think
not.
that'd be problematic, or the issue is you just want to know how much they provide them? Because I think
Yeah.
Jen hit the nail on the head. The idea behind these charters where you don't get as much money as your traditional school, and there's no local municipality that's going to add to what the state has already provided, right? So and you don't get any federal. I'm not quite sure, but I don't think that we're leveling any federal dollars to them. I think their money come from the state. So you operating, quote unquote, at a loss, and you better go out there and hustle and find some resources to help you provide resources to your school districts. I'm assuming, if I'm speaking out of line, please someone tell me differently.
No, I think you're accurate, and I think that you're not wrong that school districts and individuals and all that have always applied for grants. I think the difference is the disclosure requirement in the public school system when you are taking in external funds is pretty extensive. You don't get to take it in without there being like 9 hands on it, talking about it. And deciding whether or not, it's the alliance that your district wants to make, right? Because that's the other thing is your boards of ed have an obligation to ensure that who they're taking the money from kind of satisfies community interests, if you will.
Right.
I do think though, and Mary, you might be right. This is probably a big conversation, but whenever we talk about leveling expenditures, it has to come up because when we talk about what the charters take responsibility for, they don't have the responsibility for the special education in the same way. They don't have responsibility for transportation in the same way. And these are 2 items that are the most significant factors that our schools are talking about in terms of oppressive costs that are causing them to really restructure how they're offering education. And so I think, we know that there's a balance play. But I think that's just a very long way to say that we probably have a big conversation. And I would never hold up raising foundations for that conversation. I just put it in the room as a thing that I think we have to be cognizant of.
I'll just add, those very real challenges exist in the same way for our magnet schools and for our open choice programs, right? And we don't single them out in the same way we continually single out our charter schools. So charter schools have a accountability and a public engagement and oversight process. It's just a little different than the public schools, but it's very transparent about what that process is and the criteria they have to meet to continue to earn their charter. So we don't say such and such public school, if you don't meet these benchmarks, we are shutting your school down. It's actually a very steep level of accountability we hold our charters to, which is that if you don't do that, you don't get to renew your charter, right? And that has happened. And it should. Like, I actually think if we wanted to really talk about accountability for children, maybe we would have a broader conversation around that. But just saying, it's not that there's no accountability, it's just different. And those systems are publicly available, what the different systems are for accountability for our charters for their other systems. But the special ed costs and the transportation costs, those challenges exist in all of our choice programs, but we don't always hold up the other places to the same standard that we often single out our charter schools for. Just saying, because we have children going, right? We're saying these schools that are established, they are public schools, and our public school children are going there. And then I hate to hold, back funds and opportunities for those kids when we, have all, as a state, agreed those schools have a right to exist and offer, the best educational opportunities possible for those children. So I just also want to put that out there.
I'm just wondering if we could just add some explanation in there, in that part that says, and will be held to the same accountability standards, period. Isn't that what we're talking about?
Well, and I think for me, it has to do with not just the performance, because I appreciate what you're saying, Jen, that the student performance data, but is data that's not always clear. Like, I still to this day don't have student movement data that I can get anybody. Ajit told me that we don't track it, like kids moving in and out of charters. I don't understand. Like, we talk about student where they are. So I'm not entirely sure why we can't get clear data on that component. So there are things that are not as clearly. And I listen, I rep charters, so I want to be really clear. I absolutely, I have charters within my association that we work with and we try and help when there's challenges. And so I appreciate what you're saying about sort of their reporting and their annual like evaluation structures. But I also know that when I am trying to get budget information about the different districts that I represent, the hardest information for me to get is charter school information. I can go in and get an audit or a budget from any school district across the state. But the charters that I work with, getting actual financial information, they don't have to disclose certain things with the same kind of transparency. And if you question that, go and try and find the salary of the people who work at charter schools. Other than the ones I rep, it's super hard to track down. So I'm just saying, putting out there, and again, I don't want to go too deep down this. We're talking about money. And so the idea of public accountability for dollars is, I think, in my head. That's all.
Okay, so public accountability for dollars and outcomes. How's that?
I mean, this is a working document, so
Yeah.
we're not setting anything in stone right now. So we can start with that and we can flush out if there are more details. I think, honestly, this deserves its own conversation. Or it's maybe, I don't know if it's better in person, rather than on Zoom, but either way, I think this is it's a deeper conversation, and we don't have to say anything is finalized right now. I think, we know that all of our public schools are struggling right now, and that's why we haven't heard a lot of pushback within the education committee about increasing certain funding streams, because we know that everybody needs support, and at this point, rising tides lift all boats. So
Okay.
So, Francis, where would you put that? I mean, it seems to
Well,
go
I would
on-
look, yeah,
it would seem to go more on page 2.
I agree.
and
Under,
expand-
somewhere under, that
Expand
paragraph,
student-
phasing in a single and consistent student need-based, something, expanding on that particular piece.
Yeah, you want to extend student-centered funding to open choice and align phase into other choice programs.
Before that, I think.
Okay.
The open choice one is, in my book, a whole other conversation. Very, very, very complicated. And I find it very complicated. I think it's had so many changes over the years, and I've dealt with open choice as a superintendent, both as a sender and a receiver in different districts. And I just find it very, very complicated. And some
Fran,
of
I don't
which-
think there's one thing in education funding in Connecticut that is simple. I honestly,
that's true.
there's nothing about this
There's-
process or these formulas that are simple.
Yeah, yeah. And,
Fran, we're gonna send you, Fran, to Darien.
yeah, just as
Yeah,
an
good
aside,
luck.
yeah,
Yeah.
as an
yeah,
aside, what I would say to you is, when I was in Bridgeport as superintendent, I wanted to increase the charter school funding, but I wanted them to handle their own special ed and transportation. That would make me really happy. But, it did not happen. And, I think we have a lot of convoluted things here, and it's the same is true in open choice. The receiving district wants to provide the special ed services, if you will, but the sending district has to pay for it. It's just a very difficult, they're all good programs, but very hard to get your arms around, or whatever you want to call it.
I-
So
I
I don't know.
My concern, I don't know how open choice works in other parts of the state. I'm well aware of how quote unquote Project Concern, which turned into open choice,
Yeah,
works here. And it's very complicated, in my opinion. If you want to talk about some transparency stuff, I mean, I recall a few years ago where, there was reports that came out that, a lot of our open choice communities were receiving a lot of state money, and what the kids were getting out was laughable. It was almost embarrassing, what was being done with those dollars, or what was not being done with those dollars, specific dollars for support those kids. So I don't, besides in the region up here, where's a substantial open choice type program throughout the state?
New Haven and
you said
Bridgeport.
Yeah,
has
Bridgeport
a
has
good,
Yeah.
good size
Yeah.
one. Not,
we have
it's nothing like
number of
here.
students.
It's nothing like
nothing
Hartford.
that. Okay, so you're talking
But
about
New Haven is, I mean, I don't know, because I've moved on, but when I was in Hamden, I took a lot of open choice kids from New Haven.
in Hampton, really? Now, we did it up here because of chef, not chef, but because of, that was our answer to Brown versus Board. Why was it implemented down in those other? It's the same reason. And I find it interesting that Hamden would take open choice kids, because the idea was to send kids from the urban communities, let's say honestly Black and brown at that time, Black children, out into
Yeah.
the suburbs. But Hamden, the demographics of Hamden is, I don't know, I'm assuming it's almost like 75% Black and
No,
brown.
no,
now,
but
maybe?
not in 2007 to 14 when I was there, Senator.
Oh, so okay, but they're still taking kids from New Haven, Hamden.
I
is
think
still-
they're still taking kids. Yes, yes.
Oh.
We even had an arrangement. We had a magnet school, and we had an arrangement with New Haven to, we paid for their magnet school kids because we needed to get a balance in the magnet school. So we were taking quite a few kids at that time, but it seems as though I don't understand the whole thinking behind the program where you get more money if you take more kids.
Do
Yeah,
we
that's
have an account for how many children are participating in the open choice? That's from the State Department. We should have, right?
Yeah,
Am I
yeah.
crazy to think that?
No,
absolutely.
it's available. It's available by town, by school, by grade. It's part of the chef data that are.
It's definitely there in the chef reason, but I'm thinking again, I know why it was done in the
Yeah.
chef reason. Why was
Do we
was
still
the
have
rationale behind it is to integrate school kids in urban
Yeah, like
in urban
Norwich did it. That was where Darien basically said, "Screw you, we're not doing it." Was when Norwich tried to, talk about crossing borders for integration purposes. And I'm sure there are kids who live closer to schools in Darien than schools in Norwich
Not Norwich, Norwalk.
or Norwalk. Thank you. Oof,
Yeah.
I was in the wrong part of the
Was it
state.
Nor-
Thanks, Alec. One of those
Norwalk.
Nors.
But I remember not too long ago, wasn't it I think it was two districts that wanted to do the open choice program. I think wasn't it Madison? I think Madison has an open choice
Madison is
program.
doing it now.
Madison doing now, but there was another district that was asked to do it, and they said no.
That was Darien.
Was it Darien?
Yeah, Darien.
Yeah,
It was like 2
Darien.
years ago.
Yeah, we
Right.
sent nine elementary kids from Norwalk to Darien. They said no, thank you.
That's right. They rejected they rejected the program. Right.
Yeah. Go as Bob. Bob, who is not a happy camper. Bob Duff was
Right.
most
No,
disturbed by that.
neither was Alan Adley. He pushed it twice as superintendent, and they would not accept those kids. And guess what? They didn't even care that it was public, that anybody knew they wouldn't accept them.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But
I just
at
knew-
any rate, I'm not quite sure of what to do with this section on open choice.
Well, I mean, I think, Fran, the question remains if whether or not we think it's worth doing, right? I mean, we have a legal obligation, but I think to your point, maybe the statement is that we need to investigate a way to make this, I don't know, easier. I hesitate to ever use that word, but but maybe a simplified process. I mean, and I am not as closely experienced as you probably are, but it strikes me that maybe this is where a good think tank of people who, from the Board of Ed side, the superintendent's offices need to sit down and think like, if we're going to engage in choice programs, what's the most effective way to do this that doesn't create additional burdens for sending and receiving districts and allows us to move these students in a meaningful way? And I just have to think that the people engaged in those programs might have recommendations about how to do that in a better way. I think, me supposing over here, not having ever engaged in that kind of transfer of student or money, I don't have any meaningful feedback, but I think the people that do that work could probably be like, hey, this would be easier if we, and I think that's the people I'd like to get in a room to talk to.
I just to sort of change what you said a little bit in the perspective, Kate, it might be also helpful to get some clear data on what are the current barriers. So if there are schools that would want to participate but can't because of, let's see, can we find out about what that is looking like, and also perhaps districts or schools that have recently stopped participating. What were the barriers that made them get to that decision? Was it a delay in payments from the sending district? Was it, whatever, just to see if we can address something that's already in the system created rather than.
That makes sense.
A number of years ago, because Fran, part of the issue is kind of what's the alternative
Yep.
to some degree. So a number of years ago, Commissioner McQuillan asked the state board for authority to assign kids in the chef program to open choice districts if the district did not voluntarily accept what he regarded as a sufficient number. And the state board refused to give him that authority. That led to them going toward financial incentives to increase attendance. That is, the more students came, the greater the state financial support for the receiving district. And we tried even to get a capital program for cohort increases, so that if you increase the number of, I mean, obviously you don't want an open choice student to be alone and isolated coming from Hartford into a suburban district. So we tried to get a cohort program where if this receiving district accepted enough students, the state would pay capital improvements for like expanding locker room, expanding the gym, expanding the number of computers, that kind of stuff. So, it's always, on the one hand or on the other hand, kind of decision.
Yeah, I mean, I have very, very, very mixed feelings on open choice. I'll just be honest with you, having been superintendent in Bridgeport and in Hamden. In Hamden, I certainly welcomed the kids in, and, I think we did fine with them. In Bridgeport, I felt, as many of my parents felt, if we could just have the same kind of education that Darien had, I wouldn't need to send my kid to Darien. I want the education here for my kid, and I want my kid to be able to be with his peers and neighborhood and so on and so forth. They went through a lot of hardship to send those kids to other districts. The kids would be on the bus for an hour each way many times, and many times they they left the district, they didn't have any friends in the district, kind of thing. So I'm very mixed on it. I'm not one that should probably work on that part of it. I just feel very torn on, I know that it probably helps in segregation from our adult perspective, but I don't know how that helps if that's really good for kids. I'm just saying.
Fran, is it maybe then in this section, we ask for a little bit of research done, kind of along what Mary was saying, like to talk about the impact of choice programs at this point. What are the barriers to participation? What are and again, to layer in your question about, what is the student experience? I mean, I remember years ago, I did a NEASC visit to Simsbury. I was on the team, and they had a cohort of kids. And I have to imagine it was difficult to be those like 5 kids from Hartford that came to Simsbury. Their life did not look the same as their counterparts in Simsbury. And everybody knew it, and everybody talked about them as the kids who were from, like, they had a cohort name and everything, because they were really proud that they had these kids, but I would have been curious to know how those kids felt about it. So maybe the request that we need to put in this study is a comprehensive view of the choice programs. Who's participating? Mary, to your point, who's participating, who isn't, who was and backed out, who would like to and feels that they are unable, and then sort of what is the student experience to ensure that what we are hoping happens is what's happening.
Well, I'm gonna raise a little point of protest here, because look, part of the problem is that open choice attempts to create what amounts to a de facto regional educational structure. The part of the problem in Connecticut is that the town lines and the education lines are the same. So to say, you have a lot of questions about open choice, fine. I don't mind studying that, but then let's study, why don't we have more regional opportunities? Because you can't just take the side that we're going to reinforce segregation because of the current system, because we know that it's a problem when there were fewer urban kids going to a suburban school. I'm all for, most desegregation cases in the country are regionally based, and there's a lot of choice within the region. We don't have that. We have a voluntary system in Connecticut, Suburban towns are not part of Chef. They're not required to do anything. And if you start questioning open choice now, okay, but let's question the other side too. Should the state have the authority to impose more of a regional? So, I mean, these are big issues, and I'm not sure we want to open that can of worms, Fran.
I'm not sure, but I'm not sure it's not okay to put it in the report. That-
And Alex,
That
I don't think,
regionalization maybe needs, I mean, if we all think that, and I certainly do, I don't know about everybody else, but I'm not the one that can push it in my position. But I can tell you that I think it's absolutely ridiculous that we have districts of 50 kids. And when I was in Bridgeport, you can ask anybody. The going joke was, we can get more money if we just mention regionalization because no one wanted to regionalize, right?
Oh,
So
yes.
so let's just say we want to regionalize and then they'd give us whatever we wanted.
Yeah, you don't
well,
even
I
have
see a
to.
tagline.
You don't even have to regionalize. You got situations with one district right next to the other district don't want to work together. And I ain't talking about urban districts. I
Yeah,
recall a night up at the Capitol where I don't want to call out the districts per se, but when there was a conversation about the big R word, they brought busloads of children and families up here and said absolutely not. And that wasn't even a conversation about regionalizing with urban children.
no, I
Okay.
know.
So
I know.
anybody think that we're gonna change anything around lines and that, in my opinion, won't happen in our lifetime in Connecticut. And the last part I add to you, I'm not even gonna tell you, my child was in a choice program, and if you want to hear my story, I'll be more than willing to tell you my story with the choice program in the Hartford region. And I sit in a whole lot of different positions than the grandmother that, send their child out to a choice school and in the hopes of thinking they're getting a better education. I'm gonna tell you, everything that you think it ain't always good. And it'll be great to have. I wish we can have conversations from children who experience choice programs. I wouldn't choice. My friends, many of my friends as a kid went to choice programs out there. Back then, I think it's just a different day and age that we are. I honestly, in my opinion, back when they first started this program back in 66, 65, 66, 7,
Yeah,
it's a different conversation then than it is now, where
yeah.
one would think that, they'll be more receptive to choice kids. Actually, the number of children in the choice program has been reduced over the years for a number of reasons. But yeah, the reception has, in my opinion, is different from what it was when it first started. And I believe the outcomes for the children are quite different also.
I would just like to point out that I think, so I did a quick study. We have about 2,800 kids engaged in choice programs in the state of Connecticut right now. And I
An
think,
open choice, Kate?
yes, in open choice, about 2,800. So I think we study it not for the purpose of closing, opening, or anything. I think we
Yeah.
study it to understand if it's doing what we want it to do, and whether or not we have adjustments we need to make to get it where, because I think we have this idealized view of what we think it should be. And I think it's appropriate to study it in almost an academic lens to say, are we meeting our objective here? Because if we're not, then that begs the question of how do we do that? And I think, if it's regionalizing programs, then we need to have that conversation. If it's facilitating the movement of these students in a better way, then we do that. If it's that kids don't want to do it because they have a bad experience, then we should be talking about that too. So to me, the idea that we study the open choice programs doesn't have a particular agenda in my head in terms of doing anything more than making sure we understand what we're doing and whether or not it's accomplishing the goals and what are the moves we'd have to make to get it there. So to me, that's what the study of the open choice programs should be.
Okay, just to add to your statistics, the number of Hartford kids who apply to open choice and chef vastly outnumbers the number of seats that are available.
Mhm. Yeah, that's
Then
true.
that's important to know. Then
Yeah.
I would agree. Trust me, I don't know the answer to this, but I think that more research is needed here in terms
Let's
of,
see some language because,
yeah,
you know,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
think
I agree with Kate with that. I think more research. We should do a evaluation of the program, and is it meeting the needs that we're looking for it to meet? Because I don't recall the last time someone did an evaluation of the
No.
choice program, at least not in the chef region. But I think that's
So-
something that should be done.
yeah. So it doesn't have to be our responsibility to
Right.
do it, but it needs to be
should
our
be done.
responsibility to recommend it.
Yeah.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would feel better about it because I just couldn't move forward here with
And I
this.
want to Alex's point about language. I think it's important that when we ask for a study, it is a study without a design, like a conclusion. I think we're really trying to study to understand impact and to help determine the shifts to achieve the goals.
Yep.
And
Okay.
Sorry, Katie Balistraci. I've missed last several meetings, and I will take time to apologize to all of you about that later. As a district that has only recently joined Open Choice and have had students for a couple of years, I also might suggest language that, depending on the framing, kind of what's going, perhaps what are the challenges, but also what's going well. I think there are opportunities for some districts to learn from others.
Yeah.
And I think that might be a really important frame because I imagine that the program has varied success, that it's, to state the obvious, not kind of everyone has the same challenges or every kid is having the same experience.
Katie, what district are you open choicing with?
So Guilford actually is with New Haven. That was not our original assignment, so to speak. But because I believe it was New London was our original assignment, because they didn't have one, we made a request with legislative support to be brought into the New Haven district. So we're on, as you can imagine, the edge of the New Haven district, and have kids traveling, as Fran noted, some distance.
From New Haven, so you're connected with New Haven district, but
New
you
Haven.
thought you were going to be connected. Are you closer to New London or are you closer to New
That
Haven?
wasn't an option. It wasn't an option because so what we did was asked to be included in the New Haven district so we could offer the program.
Okay.
But we're at the very beginning.
Edge. I wonder who
We're at the
that is.
edge of the region, and also at the very, very beginning of our experience with the program.
Yeah.
We and my superintendent might have things to offer, but I think obviously districts who have been doing this for a lot longer are going to have a lot more to offer.
But I do think, Katie, that one of the things as we talk about studying this is that it is valuable to understand what motivated Guilford to get in this game, right? Like, so I do think to speak to the reasons district, because we are a voluntary participation, particularly in that part of the state.
Sure.
You know, what is the motivating factors? Because we do have the sort of the chef motivation, but then there's other motivations. And so I think understanding why these moves and how, you know, if we think this is the right thing to do, how do we encourage it more broadly? How do we support it in a more meaningful way? And how do we ensure that the students have the experiences we want them to have?
I totally agree. Completely
So
agree.
I think it's worth a study. Not that,
I do too.
you know, we probably don't need to.
Well, that makes me feel much more comfortable because I just wasn't ready to go with this, but so recommending a study, coming out of the Bergen Commission recommending a study, but I don't believe it should be our study. We don't have any money for it anyway, so you know. Okay, you okay on open choice?
It's going to depend on the language, Fran. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
Yeah.
okay, where we are with the notes we've taken, and then we'll come back with another draft. Right, George? Okay. The next piece is additional weighted funding for special ed, depending on the intensity of the services, and that's the funding weight in the ECS formula. We have it for poverty, we have it for multilingual, we have it for low income and then a concentrated poverty. What do you think?
I'd like to ask, I don't know whether George is prepared to discuss it, but what's the interaction between this recommendation, and I don't know, I'm asking a question. What's the interaction between this recommendation and the excess cost program? In other words, if you add in a weight for
Sure.
high need and we have excess, does one subtract from the other, or how do these two things interrelate?
Well, the excess cost program, as you know, is a reimbursement program that lives outside of the formula. And then the legislature also enacted the seed grant last session, which also lives outside of the formula. So there are two, but is based on the distribution of it is based on ECS. So those, in that sense, don't really have an interaction with this. The reason seed was brought outside of the ECS formula was to ensure that every district saw a benefit, because we have phase out districts in the ECS formula who are now held harmless. But in order to drive a benefit to them under the seed grant, it was moved outside of the formula.
Yeah, but a lot of things in the formula are data based. Obviously, number of kids and poverty in your city, number of reduced meals, and so on. So why isn't the high need special ed weight also based on the experience of a district in a way that interacts with what the purpose of excess cost is? I mean, I'm just trying to understand.
Well, Alec, I think excess cost is to cover, and I don't want to speak out of turn, probably Fran is probably better than I am, but my understanding is that the adjustment to the ECS formula would just account for kind of the baseline of students in the district themselves. The excess cost tends to fund those students who go on, I think it's 4 times the
400%.
4.5. So
Yeah.
those kids kick in at a different place. So you have sort of the bulk of the students who are your special education students that get covered within the ECS. And then you have the exceptional needs when the students get 4.5 times the cost. And so what has happened in our funding situation is both populations have grown. So you have more students that live within sort of, they're not 4.5 times. They're maybe twice, right? They're double and so they're getting captured somehow within the traditional ECS formula, but they don't exceed far enough to capture excess costs. So the question is, do we adjust ECS to capture more of those kids that don't reach that threshold, but at the same time acknowledge that the group exceeding that threshold is growing as well and creating an additional burden on districts far outside of the ECS. So I don't think they're the same money. I think it's just more money.
Yeah, that's
I don't
helpful.
actually think they're offsets.
Right. So the intensity of services required under this proposal are for kids who don't reach the 450% kind
Well,
of.
is that correct, George? Would we take out those kids that reach the 4.5%, 4.5 times?
I don't think that this recommendation contemplates changing anything in regards to excess cost.
Okay.
Where Connecticut is an outlier nationally is that it does not have a special education weight included in its funding formula. And the seed grant attempts to address that, as to Kate's point, by providing districts with additional resources for students receiving special education services within the district, right? From the very first dollar spent, as opposed to excess cost, which kicks in at 4.5 times the per student spending of that district. So they're wholly separate programs. And I think this just contemplates special education weight within the formula, and one that is dynamic and reflects the different kinds of services that a student might be receiving.
That's helpful.
Which
Thank you, Kate.
there are other states who have implemented programs like that.
You know, I'm crazy. I wish I could just focus on this meeting at one time, but this is the crux of a lot of the issues when you talk about the charters and the magnets not educating providing education to special ed children. These are the kids that I think where the arguments are being made, because again, they don't reach the 4.5 times plateau where the state will kick in dollars, but they meet the 2.5 times plateau, which causes those special ed costs to go up so high. And that's where you argue where, well, where we get the resources to get let's say I'm just thinking of open choice. You got a kid in open choice that goes to a school district out in the suburbs. Suburbs say this kid needs a para, or this kid need speech and language technician, and It costs another twice as much, and that's where you see Harvard has to pay these dollars, and because if they were in Harvard, you would have to find a way to pay those dollars, and I don't know if a weight on an ECS amount for a kid that's special needs is going to be the answer. I mean, it could be part of the conversation, but it's nowhere near the answer where more resources are needed. You guys kind of follow what I'm saying? Because if we're going to put on a weight on for an ECS form for a kid that's special, that's going to be a heavy weight. That's a real heavy weight, and I don't know how we account for that in ECS.
I would think that we have to do something, because I think, to your point, we have kids who are 2.5, 3, who don't trigger excess costs, but are in fact requiring those additional resources. So even if we do it, and again, I'm sure as we kind of contemplate ECS forward moving, we can look at models where districts, maybe they look with a look back method, right? And go, listen, what happened last year, and how does that inform us of what might be in the year coming? But I think most districts would, they've been scrapping, kind of making this work, as we've been seeing. I think if we added some additional weight into the formulas, it's never going to fully probably relieve what is going on, but it will make a dent, so that maybe we aren't talking about, do we do an after school program, or do we service our special ed students? Because these are the decisions that are going on right now, right? Like so if we can alleviate some of that pressure, I think that's what the adjustment to the formula does in my head, is that we start to make it a predictable set of resources for our district. At least in my head, that's where.
So I'm coming full circle on this. So let me tell you, when ECS was first introduced, some years after that, there was a separate line in the state budget for special ed funding. Special ed was funded as a line in the budget. And then the state was short on money, so they let go of the special ed funding and they incorporated it into ECS. And so the going notion was 20% of your ECS is special ed. It never happened that way.
It was supposed to be that way.
Yes, it was.
If you were getting $10,000 additional, you should, if you were entitled to I hate to use the word entitled, $10,000, you're supposed to get $12,000 because we know 20% of your cost is going to be special education.
Special ed, yeah.
And that's how it originally set
That
up.
was how it was
Governor
initially.
Weicker did that.
Yep. That's how it was done. I mean, I wasn't in administration then, but I do know that that's how it was done. And then, we found out that certainly ECS wasn't funded well enough, and as a result, special ed wasn't either. And believe me,
Right.
20% of it wasn't being used for special ed.
Wow.
So now we go full circle, and I said, well, I would much prefer a line in the state budget that went directly to districts for special education. All right. I mean, if you have these kids, why don't you just have a line in the budget? Then I'm told that if you do that, you have to fight for it every year. Right.
Mhm.
And, it could get thrown out, and
Yeah, you would.
yeah,
You would,
and
Fran. You're right.
in tough years, etc. So even though I was opposed to the weight in ECS, I thought I've come full circle and said, well, maybe that's the best way at this point in time we can do it, because I look at what's happened to excess cost, guys. I mean, it was supposed to be funded in full. Then we had Senator Looney's tiers that we bought into, and even those tiers were still, average last year was 68%, guys. 68% for excess cost. So where are we going to go with this if we don't incorporate it into the ECS funding? Personally, I would blow up the whole ECS funding period and really take a look at how we fund schools. And I'm not sure ECS is the best way to do it. And I was hopeful that the governor's commission might think of another way. I also, for the life of me, do not understand why ECS money has to go to the municipality when it's being used by the school district. And trust me, depending upon your relationship with the municipality, it doesn't always become accessible to you. So
When
what I'm
did
saying,
when did
yeah.
it become, is there a law that says it has to go to the municipality first?
Yeah, there is, but Doug, and they don't fund you. Do you know what I mean?
No, I
So,
got it. I mean, why is there a law that says it has to go to the municipality and not go straight to
I
the
don't
Board of
know
Education?
that.
Yeah.
That would be wonderful to know, because look, Alliance District, we cut that piece out and said that is your ECS, but it's going right to you. Why?
Right.
Why should
Well,
all of
I'll
it go?
tell you, we lobbied, I want to say 2 years ago and last year to get a direct funding line, like to cut out the pass through.
Yeah.
And we hit a very brick wall called the Appropriations Committee that the chairs told us essentially that was over their dead bodies would we eliminate the pass through.
Really?
That there was this sentiment that it kept the process more responsible. I didn't necessarily agree with that, and I said you're creating a point of tension around funding, but we did not get traction in advocating for direct payment to the boards of education.
And a pass-through is, in some cases, a generous word.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
it doesn't,
Thank you, Katie.
it doesn't always pass through.
That is
No.
correct. And I would argue that the sister statute that should be addressed is the minimum budget requirement versus a minimum expenditure requirement. Because right now, the municipalities just have to accept a minimum budget requirement that allows them access to their ECS dollars. Once they receive those ECS dollars, they don't actually have to expend them. They're not accountable for expending them. They're only accountable for budgeting them. So when we talk about creating a tension, that's where the tension is. So we budget, then we hold the money, then we tell the districts, we can't release this. You have to, you have a freeze right now. You can't buy paper. You can't do whatever. We're holding back, $2 million, maybe for excess costs, maybe for whatever they feel might come up. and that there's no closing the loop on that conversation because the state only requires that you budget the money, not that you expend it. And so, and I'm not saying every single district does this, but I will tell you we create a point of tension around this with respect to education funding because ECS dollars are not guaranteed money to the district, and they
Right.
should be.
It should be.
Because that's your intention as legislators, but the way that between the minimum budget requirement versus the expenditure requirement and the pass-through requirement, you marry those two together. And while we believe we've given boards of education the right to control the Board of Education resources, we actually haven't. We've made the municipal government the responsible entity for the state funds, who then get to release or hold those funds. And so, I mean, listen, I can send you the language because we drafted it a couple years ago because we started to see the tension building. And so we would be very happy to see those two things altered. But we hit a very significant brick wall in appropriations when we brought this forward.
Well, let's be a little bit cautious here too. I've been looking at the bigger picture, and I confess I speak as a former mayor. I never held ECS money back. That would have been ridiculous. But the law in Connecticut is that the municipality sets the aggregate amount of the education budget, but has no line item authority over the Board of Ed budget. I think one of the dangers of doing the direct funding from ECS is that you then give the municipality more incentive to start doing line item budgeting with the municipal contribution to the education budget rather than keeping them out of it. So, I mean, it'd be interesting to look at both sides of that issue. I don't think it's sort of black and white, quite frankly, even though logically it sounds right. But it'd be interesting to see which municipalities hold back ECS money that's been budgeted. I certainly didn't, and I haven't heard of it around here. It's really how much more municipal money gets added to ECS. And if you start saying you get all your ECS money, I think you're going to then, unfortunately, unleash some municipal budgeters who want to fuss with line items in the Board of Ed budget that currently they're not allowed to do.
I'm not sure that it would depend upon what the requirements in your town like are, because I think that the line item concept, I mean, there's always, I think, some pressure on, like, I'll use my favorite example, right? Sports, right? That gets volleyed around like
by the boards of education, not by the
by
municipality.
everybody. I've seen it like, okay, well then cut sports, right? As sort of throwaway comments at town council meetings or things like there's a lot of things that happen as the dynamic, and you're not wrong, Alex, when the dynamics are positive and districts have good, strong communication, there's no issue, right? There really isn't. When you have a board of directors or a town council that works well with their Board of Education, there's nothing going on that would make anybody, they'd be like, okay, money's going in and out. It's when there isn't. And, I know we had a situation in Stratford recently where money was held, then they were told and we're talking like $2 million that they couldn't spend because they were holding it back to make up for. So this is the stuff that is unnecessarily created with the dynamic that we have. It doesn't have to exist. But it's because municipalities have this idea of passing through, gives them ownership of the ECS dollars that's not real. And there are places that say, well, we'll give you all your ECS money, but then we're not giving you the money that we budgeted. We're holding back. And so it's not the ECS dollars they're holding, but because of the way it becomes like a financial shell game that gets played. And we've seen money go into rainy day funds so, I think there's a big conversation about why we do what we do, and does it again meet the needs of our communities to do it that way?
And in some cases, the municipality is very, very supportive of the Board of Education in a whole host of ways. And so the money doesn't, the exact dollar amount does not get passed through, but there are many, many ways they're supportive, and it's not clear all the time
That's
that,
right.
that's an even exchange monetarily.
Yeah. What do they call that? I forgot the name of it, but I read in Bridgeport all the time. It was, you know, we give you these services, so, you know, we cut your lawn or whatever, kind of.
Oh
thing.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Like in
know.
kind. Now you're
In
paying us
kind,
back.
in kind is what I'm looking
Yeah.
for.
Without any kind of formal accounting of
Right,
whether that
that's
adds
what I'm
up.
saying.
Yeah,
Katie.
no, exactly right, Fran.
That's what I'm saying.
Like in kind services. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Guys, I have to jump. I'm so sorry. I have to go start our committee meeting.
Oh, that's all right. You know what, Jen? We're going to jump too, because obviously I naively thought we were going to wrap this up today.
I love your optimism, Fran.
I do have optimism. I am optimistic, because I was trying to figure out how to do this and get it to this session. But I'm telling you, there are 3 weeks left.
Let's have another meeting sooner rather than later. It was a little long between the meetings.
Well, it's a real busy time right now. We're
Yeah.
I was going to
it's a
say, I think that
crazy
might be
time.
tricky.
Alex, it's crazy. And so, you know, I think we have to have a longer discussion, and I think we can just hope that I don't think we can put something in writing for this session. It's not up to us anyway, because even if we put something in writing as a subcommittee, it still has to go to the full Bergen Commission.
Yeah.
Do you
And
know
I'm
what I
not
mean?
sure, to be fair, I'm not sure all of the subcommittees are meeting with the regularity
I
that
don't
we
think
are.
they are. No.
mine is.
Well,
I'm sorry, you guys.
Okay, go.
Thank you,
go, Jen.
everyone,
Thanks,
for all
Jen.
of your good ideas and the very robust discussion.
Yes, it is a
Goodbye.
robust discussion. All right.
I'm going to have to jump as well. But the only thing I wanted to say before we ended the conversation about
Yeah.
the seed thing, before we move on. Oh, here's my cat. Sorry, Oreo. Go
Yep.
down.
Yep.
Is I think we do need to look at how we are accounting for the students that don't meet that 4.5 mark threshold. And the seed grants are great, but there are many in my district. I have 4 towns and 5 boards of ed that received under $1,000.
Yeah.
So it's like that's not, and we are the type of programs that, you know, Amity program has done a huge investment in building up in-house programs for special services, and that isn't reflected in what we have received. So no formula is going to be perfect, but we also have to acknowledge that there are districts that are growing in their student population, and part of that is because families are moving there for special education services, and that's not being reflected in the costs in the reimbursement of what we're getting back. So just
Mary, how much we put in for the seed grant in the first year?
Senator, I can't remember. I know the money.
I thought it was like 5 million.
Yeah,
It's
it
5
started
million
off.
statewide.
No,
legislature-
30 million.
It's
30
30
million
million.
statewide.
30 million.
I'm
Did we
missing.
fully
All right,
fund it?
sorry. I'm flipping
30
another
million.
grant
You-
We
program.
have 30 million statewide, but if the seed grant were fully funded, whatever that means, it would have been 185 million,
Yes.
right?
I
Yes, that's
never thought
correct,
we was gonna
Fran.
put $185 million in the first year. I know that was ridiculous. That was not
Yeah.
gonna happen. So we put in $30
But there are a
million.
lot of problems. There are a lot
the
of problems
intention-
with the seed grant. You know, for example, regionals weren't included and so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
we have some things that we can do differently with the seed
Okay.
grant. I apologize.
All right, we gotta run. All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
We will set another meeting. Obviously, this is going to, we're going to go into real depth. I wasn't sure how deep we were getting into this, but I love the discussion today, but we're really definitely getting into a deep thinking on this. And I think we have to go back and visit the ECS again, because maybe we want to say something about whether it should be directly to school systems and what the pluses
Fran,
and
I would-
minuses are.
I think that there's a very important conversation to be had about that. Because, and again, I think we just create a point of tension that shouldn't exist. And I
Yeah.
think that's the part that I struggle with, when we're talking about taking barriers away. That's one that I will say I was straight up told, we don't trust boards of ed. And I'm like, okay, well, that's like a $2 billion problem then. Like,
Yeah.
like, what do you,
Yeah.
like, I'm not sure this solves that problem either.
I don't know, but I know how I felt when I was in Alliance District and I got that money directly. It was wonderful because I really accounted for that money. I knew
Right.
it was coming and I knew what I was doing with it.
Well, and it does beg the question, if we are doing it with Alliance money, why aren't we doing it with all of
It's
it?
all money, right?
Like, I don't,
And why did we think it was important to carve out Alliance but we don't think it's important to carve out all of it? Crazy.
yeah. So it's weird. I mean, I don't know.
Well, we'll have more discussion. But I can't promise it'll be that quick, Alex. It's hard to
Okay.
get everybody in the same room,
Understood.
Okay. All right. Thank you all. Appreciate
Thanks.
it.
See you all
Take
soon.
care.